Hey everyone, Mulligan here, and welcome to another spoiler preview for the upcoming set, The Fall of Argenport. We got a ton of spoilers the past several days, but I'm not going to be covering all of them in this video. I'll just be talking about the ones we got on Monday and Tuesday for now. As with previous videos, I will only talk about the cards as far as their use in Constructed, unless the card is absolutely terrible in that format, in which case I'll briefly talk about its potential use in the limited formats, which are Draft and Sealed. So first off, we've got Rizal, Pridemaster. This is a 6-power 5/4 unit requiring 2 fire and 2 justice influence to play. He has flying and reckless. He has lifesteal while you have 3 or more spells in your void, and a summon ability where you deal 3 damage to an enemy. I am very excited for this one. For those that remember, and you probably only would if you hang out in the Eternal Discord, the name of this card was revealed along with the first cards ever spoiled from this set. But there were no other details given. The only thing we pretty much knew was that this was a unit. Now that we know what Rizal does, I'm pretty hyped. This might be the best 6-drop unit Greathow has ever had. There is the original Jek, who isn't terrible, but never found a place because every deck that could run him had better options, and there just weren't enough good cards to make Greathow midrange a thing. When I first saw Rizal, I immediately thought Greathow Valkyries, but I think just a normal Greathow midrange deck could finally surface from this. Midrange is all about playing the best units at each point of the power curve. Greathow is still somewhat lacking in 4-drop units, but if nothing else, Rizal brings the deck one step closer. The lifesteal ability is just icing on the cake. I don't think you try to warp your deck to give Rizal lifesteal. Reckless sucks, but the flying and incredible summon ability negate that somewhat. This is definitely constructed viable. Now Greathow just has to piece things together to make it happen. Next is End of the Barrel. This is a 6-power spell requiring 2 fire influence to play. It has warp, and you gain +8 power this turn. And this also has tribute, where you gain +10 power this turn instead. First off, I've gotta say that Direwolf put out an article at the beginning of this week sharing additional information on how tribute works. It turns out when a unit goes to your void, it actually doesn't matter where it came from. It could go to your void from your hand or directly from your deck. It doesn't have to be in play, which makes sense because the description we got initially about tribute never said the unit had to be in play to trigger it. So apologies on being a bit low on the tribute mechanic in previous videos. I'm definitely higher on it now than I was then. Also, we saw End of the Line revealed last week, and it turns out it's part of a cycle of cards. Onto the card itself. This is another card that gets added to Fire's sub-theme of ramp and cost reduction. A lot of people think Fire is all about aggression and hitting people in the face. And they're not wrong. That is Fire's main theme, but it's not Fire's only theme. This reminds me of Kindle, and to a much lesser extent, Trail Stories. The quote-unquote ramp that Fire has access to has never seen serious constructed play, but depending on what else is in this set, this card might make it viable. I've tried Kindle and Skycrad mid-range decks in the past, and the main problem is that it either ends up being a dead card too often, because you don't have your payoff cards in hand, or you can't afford to go off on your turn because you're too far behind. This is a very different card though, since it's not tied down by Spark. It's way better than Kindle. Maybe this still sees play with Primal's discard effects now that we've confirmed how Tribute actually works. Maybe this even sees play in Greathow decks, though that's probably a stretch. It'll see play if someone can figure out the best way to abuse it. The next one is End of Hostilities. This is a 6-power spell requiring 2 primal influence to play. It also has warp. You play a copy of a unit. If tribute is activated, you play 2 copies instead. At first, I gave this card a pass. My reasoning was that this costs twice as much as Mirror Image. Even the warp on this card doesn't make up for that. But there's another key difference. End of Hostilities can play a copy of any unit, even your opponent's. Pair that with the fact that this has tribute in a faction with discard mechanics, and you have something that's got potential. Copying the strongest unit on the board, especially twice, can be very strong. Now, granted, in a control meta, this gets weaker. Having a dead card until you can copy their win condition likely isn't good enough. The card is pretty good, but there's a chance it won't see play just because 6 is a lot to pay in general, especially if you can't get tribute to go off. So I'm not quite sold on this seeing serious constructed play, but it's something to keep an eye on. It's definitely better than Strength of the Pack, which can also copy enemy units, but buffing them beforehand probably won't work out for you. Next up is End of the Story. This is a 6 power spell requiring 2 Justice Influence to play. It also has Warp. You kill all units, and if Tribute is activated, End of the Story can't be negated or blocked by Aegis. This is the card in the end cycle that has the most hype surrounding it. Control players everywhere are rejoicing, and I get it. You wanted that board wipe that killed all units, even through Aegis. Some are even calling this the TJP mid-range killer. Despite me being happy we're getting a board wipe that ignores Aegis, I'm not quite as sold on this card either. It costs 6, which is even tougher to get to than 5 for any control decks not running Primal. Also, what are you cutting for this card? Is it worth running up to 12 board wipes for Justice Primal control decks? Or possibly 8 board wipes for Justice control decks not running Primal? I also don't think this is the type of card you want to run a single copy of as a 5th Harsh Rule, if you will. Keep in mind, you still need a unit to go into your Void beforehand in order to kill Aegis units with this. All I'm saying is that deck space gets tighter and tighter every set for archetypes that already existed beforehand. It'll be interesting to see what players are willing to cut in their control decks to fit this in. I'm not saying this is bad at all. It's a good card. It has Warp, for crying out loud. I'm just not as sold on it as others are. And the last end card we'll look at is End of Days. This is a 6 power spell requiring 2 time influence to play. It has Warp, and you draw a sigil of each faction from your deck. If Tribute was activated, you play them depleted instead. This one seems strange to me. It doesn't seem very good, but then again, I saw the potential in End of the Barrel, so I guess I shouldn't toss this aside. The most realistic thing you could put this in is a 3 faction deck. A 4 faction might be too greedy, with this needing double time influence to play, and 2 faction overall doesn't make running this card worth it. You really want to activate Tribute for this card. Otherwise, this is too close to Brilliant Discovery, which is unplayable and constructed. However, this has decent synergy with Voice of the Speaker if you can't activate Tribute. But even after Tribute, this just feels like a souped up Secret Pages, and I'm not sure if that's good enough. Maybe some ramp decks will find use for this. It's got synergy with Martial Ironthorn, and playing this after you drop a Vodacon can be pretty sweet. I've mentioned a lot of cards that are in Vodacombo decks, but I don't know if they want this. The deck is already fringe playable, and I don't think you want to potentially make it worse with a 6 power quote-unquote ramp spell, but maybe I'm wrong. Next up is Ironfist Faithful. This is a 1 power 1/1 unit requiring 1 Justice Influence to play. He has flying, and if Tribute is activated, he gains +1/+1. So the idea behind this is that you either play it as a 1/1 flyer on turn 1, or play it as a later on as a 2/2 flyer. I don't think this is constructed playable at all, even if Valkyrie decks become a thing. It reminds me of Valkyrie Aspirant, and I think Aspirant has a better chance of seeing constructed play than this card. But this card's pretty good in Limited. Once again, Draft and Sealed heavily focus on unit combat. There are times where it might be awkward to get a unit to die on your turn so you can play this buffed. but I would think trading with an enemy unit should be common enough to where this comes down as a 2/2 more often than not. Next is Magenta Wisp. This is a 2-power 2/2 unit requiring 1 Shadow Influence to play. You may pay 1 and sacrifice Magenta Wisp to kill an enemy unit with 3 strength or less. We're getting a Suffocate on a stick. I'm pretty excited for this one just for that alone. But there's more. Seeing this spoiled when we've already seen Living Offering practically confirms that we're getting a cycle of these cards in the next set as well. So Justice, Primal, and Fire are likely getting 2-drop 2/2 units with an ability that you have to pay 1 and sacrifice the unit to activate. Like Living Offering, this card has excellent synergy with the new Tribute mechanic. As an added bonus, this is a solid addition to Wisp's tribal decks, if those actually end up becoming a thing. I did think Living Offering had some constructive potential, but this kinda blows it out of the water. There's a chance this could not see any constructed play, but at absolute worst, this is a solid limited card. Next is Soulbringer. This is a 4-power 4/3 unit requiring 2 Shadow Influence to play. When this comes into play, you play a Wisp from your Void. If Tribute was activated beforehand, you play 2 Wisps from your Void instead. So this is a card that's already decent, but has potential to get a lot better depending on the Wisp we get in the future. This has excellent synergy with the Magenta Wisp we just looked at. The issue though is that beyond Magenta Wisp, there aren't a ton of good Wisp units that you would actually want to play in your deck. And most of them are in the Time faction. There is also Nocturnal Creeper, which has always been solid in limited, but it could see constructed play with Soulbringer in a deck that wants Nightfall activated on a somewhat consistent basis. We need to see what else is in this set for that to happen though, because Nightfall is definitely not a thing in the current meta. If this sees play in the set 4 meta, I expect it to bring its friend Mitotic Wisp along for the ride as well. The next card is Gnash Pridemaster, a 4-power 4/4 unit requiring 2-time influence to play. If Tribute was activated, Gnash gains +3/+3. And when Gnash attacks, you discard the top card of your deck. If it was a unit, your other units are invulnerable to damage this turn. Another conditional 4-mana 7/7. This one's better though. Time is a faction that places a heavy emphasis on units, so something going to the Void is pretty likely if you're running the right effects for it to happen. Worst case scenario, you have Living Offering. Gnash is probably going to work best in Xenon, since Shadow has cards that can get units back from the Void to offset Gnash's second ability. But it could work in Elysian too, if you, once again, run specific cards that help trigger the Tribute. Gnash is pretty solid, but I think this will still play second fiddle to Sandstorm Titan, meaning that if it does see constructed play, it probably won't define the meta. And the last card for this video is Eva, Island's Elite. 5-power 4/5 unit requiring 2 Primal Influence to play. She has Flying, and if Tribute was activated beforehand, you create and draw 2 1/2 Cloud Snakes with Flying. And Eva also has Infiltrate, where you create and draw 2 1/2 Cloud Snakes with Flying. Very, very good card. I think this is so well designed. If Eva was 4 cost, she wouldn't be broken, but she'd probably be pushed card status. But as it is now, she's right on the line. So you can potentially get 4 copies of what are basically Cloud Snake hatchlings. That might not seem impressive at first, but there's some cool stuff you can do. First off, if you manage to activate Tribute or Infiltrate, Eva becomes an excellent way to help trigger the Tribute effect of another card in your deck. This even has synergy with a somewhat forgotten card that saw use in Limited quite a bit, Hatchery Hunter. Turning all your Cloud Snakes into 3/3 Serpents sounds very exciting to me. But hey, maybe you don't want to get rid of your Cloud Snakes. Maybe you actually want to use them. Well, they end up being pretty useful. in a certain Elysian token deck running Xenon Obelisk that used to be the best deck in the game once upon a time. Does a card like Eva mean the return of Shimmer Pack? Maybe. If nothing else, this is a limited bomb. I love this card. Again, it's just so good design-wise, even if Eva sees no constructed play. Thanks for listening to my thoughts on some of the recent spoilers from the Fall of Argenport that we got earlier this week. As always, if you liked the video, feel free to hit the like button. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback and what brews you're thinking about trying when the new set finally drops. I've got other Eternal content on this channel as well, so feel free to look around. And if you like what you see, consider subscribing so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.